Hi, welcome to another BioDevils podcast. I'm joined with Captain Kaos here,
What's up, guys?
and we're here to talk about more Silent Hill again.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, I remember when we first did the first podcast talking about it, we had a lot of concerns about multiple things really because well, the first major red flag, of course, is that, like we mentioned in the previous podcast talking about this, that Blooper Team was going to be the ones who are going to handle the Silent Hill 2 remake. And if you know anything about Blooper Team, they're mostly known for the Layers of Fear games and some other games that are very much like Layers of Fear, and a lot of those games are unfortunately very reminiscent of a certain trend in recent horror games, which is, I would call it, kind of like the walking simulator, which is unfortunately very popular with many indie horror devs, and I would even say maybe some AAA devs too. That unfortunately, this is kind of what a lot of horror games have sort of evolved into post PT, which is an unfortunate side effect of the popularity of PT, that a lot of games have tried to sort of follow the trend of being these first person horror games. Well, I would say it's mostly due to PT and Amnesia, but
Yeah,
a lot of games have sort of tried to copy that formula because, well, a lot of devs, and I can't blame them for it, have seen success, have noticed the success of games like that and have thought, well, I can do that too. And without, of course, really understanding what made those games scary in the first place.
yeah,
Um,
or what made them unique in the first place
yeah,
to
and,
begin
and
with.
Bloober Team is another one of these devs, and for some reason, I guess Konami saw fit to have them helm this project. So we didn't really see too much for the first teaser trailer they released. It was mostly just cinematics, but we just sort of commented on the model for James and just the overall feel of the trailer and how it kind of we were a little bit apprehensive about it because it just kind of it seemed like the model for James, first of all, he doesn't really he doesn't really look at a lot like the original James Sunderland. He looks a little bit older, and it
Well,
just
they've
seems a
already
little bit off.
confirmed. Well, they've already confirmed too that both James and Maria are older in this version of the game
Yeah,
for some reason.
which is a weird change, but I don't know. I guess maybe they're doing that just because maybe the models they got look like that. I'm not sure, but um,
Well,
either way,
and also too, we
yeah.
when we previously talked about it, because we talked about when you and I talked about Silent Hill, we were talking about some additional information that had come out and what um, another developer felt like that there was no reason to have a remake or in their eyes it was a remaster, but
Mm,
no reason to have another Silent Hill 2 because it was fine the way that it was. And
yeah.
weirdly enough, from a Western dev, they were saying that like they're probably not gonna do it justice, which is kind of weird. But they also had happened to work on another Silent Hill game that wasn't well received. Um,
Hmm.
so we did talk about that information before, and now with the current information, we've seen a little bit more to the game. We've seen combat, we've seen actual environments, and it's not looking too hot. It
Yeah, it's
really
funny
is
because we
not.
did say in the first podcast that we were going to kind of reserve judgment until we got a more fleshed out trailer that actually shows the combat, and now we have it. Because before all we had was just kind of a sort of a leak, I guess, of what the combat might look like, but now we actually see what the combat is, and yeah, it's it's pretty bad, at least in my opinion. But it seems like a lot of people kind of share that sentiment if the ratio of the combat trailer is anything to go by. But
I
yeah, I mean,
yeah, I'm
there,
thinking too, and I'm sorry to cut you off. It's like I'm
yeah,
thinking that like at the time before Silent Hill 2 remake was even announced, right? People were really hyping up, oh, like there's these rumors for new Silent Hill projects that are coming, and everybody's hyping this stuff up, right? And look,
mhm,
I'm not saying that people can't get excited or they can't be hopeful for a potentially good Silent Hill game, right? But historically speaking, Konami just hasn't done that, right? And
yeah,
I don't know about you, but personally, and especially after seeing this trailer, Silent Hill is like a franchise that honestly I think would have been better off staying dead, because at least, with a new entry in Silent Hill, you wouldn't have to expect one, so therefore you couldn't be disappointed. Whereas in this case, we now kind of know what to expect. We know the kind of development history based off of the developers that are involved with this. And there's really nothing to be excited about when it looks this generic. It looks bad. Like,
well, it's funny you say that too, because I mean, immediately my impression just upon seeing the trailer was that it reminded me actually of Silent Hill Homecoming, which is a game that one of the games that came out post the breaking up of Team Silent, and it was a game that was one of the first Silent Hill games, I would say, that focused mainly more so on action horror and was less a focus of survival horror. And it had combat, and the combat looked really similar to this, how it was like an over the shoulder sort of camera perspective, and it sort of had the main character just kind of beating up on the monsters. And that's kind of what the impression I got from this trailer. And one of the first things I saw that just kind of, I sort of, I mean, not that I really had any to begin with, but I pretty much lost all hope when I saw that there were these rapid button pressing sequences in the game, where, if you get caught by a monster, you just have to rapidly tap X.
I was pretty much right there with you on that, because
yeah,
I saw that.
This is not going to be good.
I saw that. I'm not even kidding you, because I was watching the showcase with James, Arian, and Singh at the time. I think Brandon might have been there as well, or I think somebody else was there with us too, but I don't remember. But anyway, we were watching with a group of people in the server, and like, as soon as I saw that, I'm just like, oh boy, Silent Hill has QTEs. Let's go, boys! Like,
yeah, I mean, it's funny too, because I mean, that's something else that Homecoming did, I believe, is QTEs. It had many QTEs, and I it's kind of crazy to me how, like, I mean, I feel like QTEs can work with certain games, but then there are some games I feel like just should not have them. And I don't think Silent Hill is one of those games that needs to have QTEs.
And see, like, the thing with the QTEs, right, is like, I wouldn't have so much of an issue with them, especially like if you could turn them off, right?
Yeah.
I just think that was not a good place to show them, especially in a trailer where you're supposed to give a first impression of what people should expect out of a Silent Hill 2 remake, right? A game that the developers have claimed that they were big fans of, right? Which, based off of what we've seen...
Well, who else was a big fan of Silent Hill was Tom Hewlett. Our friend Tom Hewlett, who was also a really big fan of Silent Hill. You see how that turned out.
Well, the Tom Hewlett situation, when you really go into it too, it's like there's a whole story on that too. I don't want to get too much into it. I guess he can't really be
blamed for everything he did, but
he was the forefront of a lot of issues, right? So it's like, well, right? So, but that aside, right? Like, what we have seen based on both the cinematic trailer and the gameplay does not equate to what the developers have stated, right? Because like we're seeing like more action orientated combat, and before, I know people are going to make the argument for one way or the other where, Silent Hill has always had janky combat, it's always been bad, so this looks way better, or vice versa, it's supposed to look bad, so this makes sense that it looks bad. But I think what people kind of fail to realize, and I know we were kind of talking about this in private before, is that like Silent Hill for combat, like, it wasn't great per se, but it made sense for the time. And for a remake, I think it would have made more sense to make animations, even if it was in this over-the-shoulder perspective, that kind of showcase like these characters, or this character, for instance, right, who is just an ordinary person who doesn't know how to fight, who doesn't know how to like use firearms necessarily to the best of his ability, right? In a very specific way with certain animations, and that's not what we're getting. We're just seeing a very generic looking cover shooter. I mean, we even have the bobblehead nurses mantling over just obstacles in the environment. Which, why are there even obstacles in a Silent Hill game, right? Why is there even cover in a
Yeah,
Silent Hill game? Like, that doesn't make sense.
it's a really weird design decision. Like I don't know what the thought process behind that was. I mean, especially like you said, yeah, they're like vaulting over objects in the environment. Like I just yeah, it's ridiculous. But I mean, I would say you don't even really need to have like some janky combat or anything like that. I would say you just need to de-emphasize the combat. Like the combat shouldn't be the main focus. And
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that it's just the combat trailer is already a bad thing. I would say like that just have a gameplay trailer, but it's focused on the horror element because that's what Silent Hill is a horror game. And the first trailer you show of gameplay is a combat trailer, which is like it's already like I mean I just feel like a broken record, but I mean it's just not a good sign. Like why are we having a combat trailer be the first trailer that we see of any gameplay? It should be a trailer that is just showing you the horror element of the game.
Oh,
And
and what's weird
yeah,
too, and I don't mean to cut you off, but like they did kind of a bait and switch, and I didn't notice this until Divik pointed this out to me. Is that like they kind of started this trailer off showing off like puzzles being done first, right? Like, and it almost
mhm.
seemed like that's what they were going to emphasize was like, hey, like there's like this exploration, and like you have to find notes and stuff like that, and
I feel like not to cut you off either, but I
Mhm.
feel like you can bet the puzzles are they're gonna be dumbed down
There,
further.
yeah, there probably are. Like they're they're gonna be on the easiest riddle difficulty. Actually,
That's
if
going
it's
to be
even
another
easier,
interesting thing. That would have been an interesting thing if they had shown like, hey, can you choose the difficulty of the puzzles? Like, I'm actually really curious as to if that's going to be a thing in the remake.
right? Like,
Probably
because
not, but like, I mean, I like it's probably just going to be one difficulty most likely. It's definitely going to be modernized in that way.
yeah, and I was kind of expecting it to be more like now that I think about it, like I was kind of expecting it to be more like, okay, well, here's a couple of aspects of the game, and maybe we would have seen like one or two enemies, but that's about it, right? And not actual combat.
Hmm.
And they just went straight into combat as if like this is the emphasis of what
Yeah,
Silent Hill is, right?
I mean, it's like I was saying before this recording too, is that like we have James just fighting multiple different monsters in certain areas, it looks like, and just beating them with different blunt objects and shooting them. Um, and it's just, I mean, aside from just the QTEs, is just the fact that you're going up against multiple different monsters in combat is already like it's just no, this is not what this game should be like. James should not be able to go up against multiple different monsters in combat, in melee combat, or even just shooting them. Uh, you should have limited resources. You should, if you fight anything, it should be like a last sort of just like the last sort of like your last decision you should make. Like you should try to run by them instead of fighting them in the first place. Which is the fact that you're fighting the monsters and it's sort of emphasized that you're fighting the monsters anyway. Is just
Yeah, because I mean,
yeah,
you're not playing Chris Redfield from Resident Evil. You're just
yeah.
playing
This
average
it's
people.
I mean not even
Like,
yeah, I mean you're not even playing Isaac Clarke or anything like that. And I mean Dead Space at least handles it well, where like the enemies are still dangerous even though you are fairly capable. Then you have resources, even though sometimes they are limited. But yeah, I mean this is not that kind of game. Uh, and it just feels like this is just the definitely the wrong approach with this remake is kind of having it more so be an action horror game.
yeah, and like again, I wouldn't mind so much the over the shoulder aspect because that doesn't bother me so much, per se.
Right.
I
Like we
know,
were
I
saying
know.
before this too, like it could work, but it needs to be done in a certain way.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I don't think Blooper Team or the devs that are really gonna understand how to do that. I mean, not to mention like we should point out too, the only other game that Blooper Team has done that's in like this third person perspective that I'm aware of is the Medium. Is the only other game they've done that's kind of like this. Every other game they've done is like a first-person horror game.
Which
So
is weird when you think about it, because you think they would
yeah,
have tried to emulate the medium in terms of having the. I wouldn't say the medium necessarily had fixed camera angles, more so
well,
like dynamic cameras,
yeah,
similar to
that's what I was
Silent Hill,
saying too.
right?
Like the medium, you would think would be a game that they would try to take more inspiration from when they're doing a Silent Hill game, but instead it looks like I guess they've taken more inspiration from or maybe it's like either the modern Resident Evil remakes or like some of the post Team Silent games actually. At least that's kind of what it reminded me of, and not like what they did with the medium, which is, I mean, really is unfortunately as close to Silent Hill as I feel like they've gotten. Is the medium. I feel like that's probably going to end up feeling more like a Silent Hill game than this remake.
Which is funny because I've heard people say that that game isn't really that good either.
Yeah,
So, granted, I still want to try it out because it looked interesting enough, but I've not heard
yeah, I
good things
haven't. That's
about
one
it.
I haven't played, so I can't speak on that. But yeah, that's what I've heard as well.
Yeah. But yeah, like it's strange to me that like you would think that the gameplay would be more like that. Although we kind of already knew that it was going to be over the shoulder because we saw a glimpse of an off-screen shot of one of the developers' workstations where we saw them working on over-the-shoulder animations, right? So
Hmm.
it wasn't like it was unknown that it was going to be over the shoulder. We just didn't know to what extent this game would be
Right.
like in terms of gameplay, right? And I know some people will make the argument, well, like well, why should it matter if Silent Hill is over the shoulder or fixed camera angled? But I personally, I've always argued that Silent Hill has never really been truly fixed camera angled. Like Resident Evil has always been more of a dynamic camera perspective. And I feel like that had always worked in Silent Hill's favor, especially Silent Hill 1. Like in the beginning of the game,
Hmm.
when you go into that like first alley and see that guy like strung up on the barbed wire, right?
Yeah.
Like just the way that the camera is just so disorientating, and because it's not necessarily, again, not necessarily fixed for most of the game, it's very dynamic, like, and we're not seeing that. It's also not really a good sign, and it really is such a jarring thing to see when, like, this is a team that claims that they're fans of Silent Hill, that Silent Hill 2 is their biggest inspiration. They have a game that, from a camera perspective at least, and thematic perspective is very similar to Silent Hill, and yet they go for the complete opposite of what Silent Hill should be.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, I would even argue that you could still use that kind of camera angle in a modern game and it could still work. I mean, it's not really like outdated like tank controls or anything, for instance. So I mean, they could still have done that, but of course, we know they opted not to. Uh, but yeah, it's just it just confirms, unfortunately, our worst fears that unfortunately, Blooper Team was not the right choice of dev to handle a Silent Hill 2 remake. They just, I mean, and at the time before we had these trailers, we were just kind of basing that on their track record that a lot of the games they've made have been just, these first person, basically like, walking sims. And I mean, even the medium to some extent, it looks just like it's not, like I guess a third person walking sim. Uh, and yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
there's nothing
there's
really to indicate in their like in their track record to say that they would be able to handle a game like Silent Hill. Uh, it just shows that Konami didn't really doesn't really it doesn't seem like they really think these things through. They just I don't know if they just pick these devs out of a hat and they're like, hey, let's just give it to these people and have them do a Silent Hill game, or it could just be because of Blooper Teams, maybe they have some kind of influence within the industry or whatever the case may be, is the reason that Konami chooses them and not really based on their talent or anything like that, because it just seems like Konami doesn't, I mean, as we know, of course, Konami doesn't really seem to care about the Silent Hill franchise, or really I would say most of any of their of the franchises they have.
No,
When
even I was gonna say too, because since we're talking about Konami, because I was gonna say like I don't want to put all of the blame on Blooper, because I do think that
yeah,
most of it should be going to Konami because they're the ones
well,
that
I,
hold the rights
I
to
think
this
it's just
IP,
because
right?
Bloober, like it's not all their fault. It's just that they're just not the right people for the job,
I
and
agree. Yeah,
the blame I would say mostly would probably just fall on Konami that made the decision to have Bloober be the ones to handle it.
yeah, I agree in that regard. Like, yeah, because Konami at the end of the day has that final say as to which team could work on it. I remember, I think Divik was the one that was saying this, that he feels like what it likely probably was is that Blooper Team probably came up with like a mock-up build to show off to
Mhm.
Konami, and Konami was just so impressed by it that that's why they were chosen over any other potentially better development studio that would know how to handle a Silent Hill 2 remake. I
Yeah.
still stand by the idea that I think if a Silent Hill 2 remake should have happened, it should have been under Blue Point, because they would have likely handled that game more respectfully. Granted, it would have been a PlayStation exclusive game, but like I would much rather have a game that's exclusive that turns out to be more faithful to the original game than have it be done by a studio that just has not proven themselves to actually be consistent in terms of the quality that um, their games are, at least
Mhm.
consistent in terms of being very good or very positively received, right? Because
Yeah.
most of Blooper's games are not. They're just very mixed as far as I'm aware, um, which is not surprising to say the least, especially when we see this gameplay. Um, I think too, like as far as when we're talking about like this remake, as far as like where Konami stands, and just how they're handling their franchises, like even Metal Gear Solid, which or Metal Gear, right? Even though they've half-assed that Master Collection, which is, as far as I know, has been patched already, so they've addressed some of the issues that people had with the Master Collection ports.
Mhm.
Metal Gear is really the only franchise that like Konami cares about, and so much
Yeah.
so that like I'm willing to bet, and I think I mentioned this before, that I'm willing to bet that the like the MGS3 remake, that's going to turn out fine, because from what little gameplay we've seen of MGS3 remake, that looks good. Like the changes that they're
I didn't
making to
even
the
I Oh, that's right. Yeah, they did. Yeah,
Mhm.
because now I remember they did show like I think a little bit of gameplay in that
they showed like
initial.
some general movement. They didn't show
Yeah.
combat, but they just showed general movement and like CQC grabs, and that's about it.
Yeah.
Um, but MGS3, like that remake, which is called MGS Delta Snake Eater, right? Um, that looks more promising, and the changes that they're making with that remake make way more sense than the changes that we're seeing from Blooper Team with Silent Hill 2 remake.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Because I mean, most of what they seem to be doing with this game is just is just turning it into pretty much just just a modern horror game. At least in terms of it being more like action oriented and over the shoulder. Um, which is really kind of another trend with horror games. Not so much as I would say like the first person uh, run and hide sort of horror games. Uh, but yeah, they're just kind of doing that and not really so much trying to recreate the original Silent Hill 2, or just sort of trying to updating it a little bit, but still keeping to the same feel of the original gameplay. Um, but yeah, yeah, that's yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off,
oh
but
no,
yeah,
no,
you were.
it's fine. I was just saying that like and given that we know like what we know now, right? It's like if you were to ask me, just like if I didn't know anything about MGS3 remake, and I didn't know anything about Silent Hill 2 remake, I just found out that these games are getting remade, right? And you showed
Mhm.
me both like everything from MGS3 Remake and everything from SH2 Remake, and you asked me which one feels like a project that feels like it's made by people who are potentially legitimately fans of said franchise, who understand what that game was and what it did for the time, and this, that, and the third, I'd still say MGS, just given from what we've seen, right? Silent Hill, based off of everything we've seen from not only just a gameplay standpoint, but even just an environment standpoint, the way that the enemies animate, like it does not feel like a game that is made by people who claim that they are big fans of Silent Hill 2 in particular. What it feels like is similar to how, post Team Silent era, right? Every Silent Hill game was basically just made by people who only understood surface level Silent Hill. That's what it feels like, right? It's just very surface level Silent Hill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny too, because in the comments of the reveal trailer, like, a lot of people are pointing out how this kind of looks like a almost like a fan made, low budget, like, fan made game, and it's funny because it just doesn't. I mean, another thing I would point out too is that it just doesn't really. It just kind of feels too just like I don't think it is, but it just kind of feels like it's a low budget, like, almost like a fan project or something. It doesn't really feel like this is like, oh, it's a big AAA release or anything, like that. I just kind of got this sort of low quality feeling from just generally from looking at the gameplay and the just how everything looks. And it's funny because this game is, like, very, for the PC release at least, it's very demanding of your resources. Like, it wants you to have, a pretty hefty GPU and quite a bit of RAM and everything. And I'm just looking at it and I'm just like, this game does not look like it's something that really needs to utilize that much that much of your resources. I mean, I know the big thing with this is like, oh, it's an Unreal Engine 5 game and all that, but it just doesn't look it. It just looks.
It doesn't look like it's taking advantage of the actual technology of Unreal 5, right? Like, it feels like they're really trying to play it safe. I think I mentioned this before too when we talked about it before, because Blooper team is based in Poland, and being that I've lived here for pretty much 2 years now, I can tell you that people half-ass their work here. They don't care, and I wouldn't be surprised if the developers at Blooper are half-assing their work because they don't care. Like, people in Poland, they love to just try to make a quick buck, and they don't care about trying to give a quality product.
I mean, it's funny too because, like, we've kind of gone quite a while from the first reveal trailer until now, and it just, like, just looking at the trailer, it really doesn't feel like that. Like, based on how much time has passed, it just doesn't really, like you said, like, the work doesn't really reflect that. It definitely looks very half-assed, and like they just did. It just feels like they didn't really spend a lot of time on this. And another thing, I don't know if we've gone over this, but everything looks. People pointed out. All the environments, everything, it just it looks very clean in comparison to how the original looked and felt. The original had all this, all these grungy textures, all these, like, just kind of, it had that atmosphere to it, and I'm not getting a sense of the atmosphere with the what I'm seeing from this trailer. I mean, if anything, like, it's all very surface level. You have the fog, you have, the kind of abandoned buildings and stuff, but you don't have the like it's not just that with the original Silent Hill games, right? You have the sound design, you have the kind of, I mean, we've gone over all the camera angles, the environment just looks and feels dirty. You don't really want to go out into the next room because you don't know what monsters are going to be waiting for you there. And a lot of what helps that is the sound design, because of just Silent Hill, as I would say, is also kind of known for that as well, is having just really good sound design. And we're not really seeing any of this from the trailer. All you get is, like I said, very surface level. You see the fog in the town, you see the abandoned buildings, you see all these monsters that James is fighting, but that's about it. You don't really get a sense of dread, of a sense of the atmosphere or anything like that from this trailer. It just looks like, they're trying to copy certain elements of the original game without really understanding uh, what made them scary, what made them people just not really just apprehensive about playing the game. I mean, it's just
Yeah,
I
well,
don't know. I'm
and I
not getting
think
that feeling from it. Yeah.
from an environment standpoint, right? Because like, okay, just even just the general look of the environment, right? Like, because I'll talk about the like text that like was seen on one of the screenshots that
Yeah,
was
you're
shown off,
right. Yeah,
right?
that's
We'll
another
we'll
thing.
talk about that in a second, but I just want to talk about this just the general environment, right? Like the thing that made like the old Silent Hill games great was like Team Silent literally went to like abandoned locations, take photos to see like how these places like start like looking run down, like basically
Mhm.
abandoned, right? And just not like kept in well shape, right? Um, and that's not really what this looks like. It looks like something that was just like, oh, this was just recently abandoned, like maybe like a year ago, not even a year ago, maybe like 2 months ago, right? So it still looks
Yeah.
okay, but it's starting to get run down, right? I can't really knock the fog because the fog looks good. I mean, the fog technology and just smoke technology
Oh,
is
well,
probably just going to look
I mean,
better.
I don't have a problem with so much the fog. It's like, yeah, it's more so the point I'm trying to make is that, yeah, we have the fog and we have everything that people that Silent Hill is known for, but we don't have all without really having all this other important stuff that
Yeah,
actually makes the game scary.
yeah. Well, and even just tonally speaking, right? Like the environment just doesn't really scream what it's supposed to, right? Like it doesn't feel like Silent Hill per se. It just feels like it's just trying
Mhm.
to go for a more generic feel. Like if this
I
was a indie game, right? That just so
Mhm.
happened to be inspired by SH2, right? And it looked like this, I wouldn't be making such a big deal about it, right? And I don't think
Yeah.
you would be either, because I think we would be a little bit more optimistic. But this is not an indie game. This is an actual Silent Hill 2 remake that's being approved by Konami and being handled by a studio that clearly doesn't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Case in point, the text on the wall, which is just so on the nose about like, oh, okay, and I forget exactly what it says. I don't know if we have it here or not. But it was just
I don't have it pulled up in the moment, but um it said something like I think it said something along the lines of like you killed her or something like that. Uh, it's very just in your face.
right, which is
I,
like, what happened to the subtlety of Silent Hill? Because that was another thing
yeah,
too that I think Team Silent especially really understood back in the day was instead of being like in your face about everything, just be really subtle, right?
right. Yeah, I mean, I it's like I mean they're also just kind of they're kind of even just
Oh,
kind of spoiling the twist anyway with the
I have it.
just
It says reap what you
yeah.
sow, right? Which is like,
Uh,
that doesn't
yeah,
sound generic at all, right?
right, yeah.
Do you remember all the
uh,
cryptic shit in Silent Hill? Like, there
mhm.
was a hole here. It's gone now. Like, what the
It's
fuck does
gone
that even
now,
mean, right? Like,
yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that people can just is sort of just left up to interpretation, which is what I liked about the series. It kind of makes me wonder, like, I mean, I'm wondering how they're going to handle certain segments from Silent Hill 2, like the like certain really infamous ones, like for instance, like the long staircase that just goes on and on and on and on, and I mean, I feel like I'm interested to see how they're going to mess that up.
they're gonna
How are they
turn
going to
it
mess?
into the longest walking segment. I
Yeah,
promise you.
because that's another case where the sound design really makes it really scary, and I mean I feel like they're probably not even gonna have any sound when you're just walking down those stairs. um but yeah, but I mean, even seeing this picture too, it's I would say this is another example of them not really understanding um what makes the game, or what the environment is just not really that it's not really that dirty. I mean, you kind of have this these sort of like messed up walls and stuff. But I mean, then you have this. It's kind of alongside just more like a more clean looking environment with like
Glossy
a light.
tiles and
Yeah, the
not.
tiles are still intact too. They're not even broken or anything. They're still like, I mean,
You're right.
it's
Like the floor doesn't look so bad outside of like that doorway, but like,
yeah.
come
I don't know.
on.
It's I wouldn't be surprised if this is all just like an asset flip or something. Like they just took like these maps and just kind of just called it a day. You know, they maybe had these like pre-packaged maps, and maybe they did some editing here and there or something, and then they were like, okay, this is this Silent Hill 2 environment.
This is
Uh,
it, boys. We've
yeah.
done it. Like,
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if, like, yeah, we have like an asset library or something in Unreal Engine 5, and they're just like they just pick and chose what to take from it, and they're just like, okay, here you go.
yeah, it's even in this other this short clip from that trailer where like the enemy is just mantling over. Like I just again, I don't
Yeah,
understand why there's cover in a like in a Silent Hill game, and even if that had to be there, right? Why, why is it mantling over like it's ready to like square up, right? Like, like
right.
shouldn't it be moving in a very particular way, like very unnatural or very like uncanny and just unsettling,
I mean,
right? Like,
even the Silent Hill movie understood this. You know, they have the nurses just kind of moving around with just these twitchy movements and sort of just more so reacting to sound and all that. And I mean, in this one, you just see a nurse just almost like an enemy from a third person cover shooter, like vaulting over an obstacle, just ready to kill you. You know, it's not really it's like, yeah, I don't really remember the nurses acting like this in any of the Silent Hill games. Uh, but
it,
yeah, I mean, I am glad that at least Masahiro Ito came back for the monster designs and all that. But I mean, it's almost like a waste if you have like devs that are that just don't really understand Silent Hill in general. And I mean, you have at least one of the original people coming back to work
so
on it. But
so I think I know they have like they have three particular people from the original team: Akira Yamaoka, Masahiro Ito, and I forget the third
oh right,
person. And that's all fine and great, right? But I feel like this is the same problem that like, as far as I know, Silent Hill 4 ran into, where like even though you had like key figures from that team, it wasn't the same team, and so they didn't
yeah,
fully understand what Silent Hill was supposed to be. Although a lot of people would argue Silent Hill 4 wasn't as bad as what came after the fact, right?
oh
Um,
yeah, no, I mean it's definitely way better than everything we got
so
after that.
so like at least in that regard, right? Like, I kind of see this as a way of like, yeah, the you could have some of the key members from that original team, right? You could have the
Mhm.
original composer, that's fine and great, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be a good Silent Hill game, because they're missing
Yeah,
a lot of what made that team function at the time and what made them understand what these types of games are supposed to be. I mean, hell, I think the original creator of Silent Hill is actually at a different studio working on Slitterhead, which is
yeah,
supposed to
which
be a
is a game I'm
game.
actually kind of excited for. Um, so it's funny because I feel like that game will probably feel a little bit more like Silent Hill than this will.
Well, I think that game is going more for a like Parasite vibe. So,
Yeah,
so
yeah, but I mean, even still, like just because of how it looks and everything, it just
mm,
reminds me more of Silent Hill.
yeah. So like this just looks eh. like this is
Yeah,
what I would expect from an indie dev team, and this would look impressive for an indie team. But
hmm
Blooper is not an indie team. At least they're not at this current point, right? Because they've already made several AAA releases at this point. Um,
yeah. I want to say they're technically like a double A developer, but yeah, I mean, it's yeah, they're not really that indie anymore. They probably they used to be, but uh, yeah, not at this point. Uh, Yeah, so I mean, but it's like we said, I would say the blame more so falls on Konami for just kind of, just not really giving a shit about the franchise in the first place, and just handing it off to, you know, just I guess maybe what Divik said. Maybe they presented something that Konami saw and they liked, and they just didn't really think much of it. They're just like, yeah, you can do Silent Hill 2 remake. Um, I mean, the only other thing, I mean, it's like the only other thing with Silent Hill with the new games I'm even somewhat interested in is Silent Hill F, because at least that feels I mean, it's more like a Japanese inspired, like horror inspired game, but I mean, it still has that feeling of of like a Silent Hill game, because Silent Hill at least is partially inspired by Japanese horror.
Yeah,
But
it's inherently a Japanese horror game, right? Even though it's set in an
yeah,
American
it's
setting, right? It's
it's more
inherently
so a blend
Japanese.
of Western and Japanese horror, but a lot of Western devs just don't really get it, and it's just funny to me that Japanese devs seem to understand it better than Western devs do.
Oh,
Um,
see, I would have agreed, but then I played fucking Silent Hill: The Short Message, and that, as it
oh,
turns out, was developed by a Japanese studio. And do you want to know which studio worked on that game?
I don't know who worked on it.
Hexadrive, which is the same studio
Mhm.
that worked on The Third Birthday.
Well, I mean, Third Birthday wasn't very good, and it wasn't though. I mean, it's
Which,
I,
and I
wasn't
don't.
that the game that kind of killed the Parasite Eve franchise? It was Third Birthday. Like, is it? A
So
lot of people played it.
so from what I understand, Third Birthday came out during a situation where Square Enix technically does not own the rights of Parasite Eve, but they own the rights to the
Mhm.
characters, or something along those lines. Like, and they still technically do stuff with the first two games. Because like they were recently doing like a crossover thing for Spotify, where I think they put up the soundtrack for the first Parasite Eve or something like that. But anyway, beside the point. So they can do things with the first two Parasite Eves, but anything post the second Parasite Eve, they would have to get approval from the author of the actual like novel, or the
Yeah.
novelist or whatever, right? But because and they didn't have those rights at the time, they just decided to make something else, right? Which still uses the characters and whatnot, and still, technically speaking, unless if something else changes in the future, set in that same universe, right? Um, but not necessarily called Parasite Eve, right? And that's how that game came to be. Um,
Okay.
so had the original writer also been involved too, because I think that's part of the reason why the story is so different too, is that this was like an original story and not something that was inspired by the original creator of Parasite Eve. um, that
Mhm.
story might have turned out a different way. So that's
Yeah.
as far as I know in regards to Third Birthday. um, and I don't want to shit too much on Hexadrive, right? But Hexadrive also worked on a couple of other projects too. Mostly like the recent Super Bomberman games, and they also worked on the DLC for. They worked on the Not a Hero DLC for RE7,
Mhm.
which, as much as I don't like RE7, I could at least give them credit that at least that DLC was somewhat decent. So it's not like
Yeah, I actually thought that was okay.
it's not like that dev team or studio is like completely bad.
Yeah.
However, the Short Message is one of the worst fucking games that I've ever played. And I don't want to go into too much detail. I'll try to talk about as much as I can, but I also want to save that for a review, because I feel personally insulted by that game. Um, because it essentially feels like a game that is um, a tech demo that is meant to be a PSA for suicide and abuse and stuff like that, and depression and whatnot. And as somebody who's gone through depression and attempted suicide in my life in the past, right? Like, I feel insulted because I feel like it really misses the mark. I don't want to go to, like I said, I don't want to go too much into detail for that one, because I want to save that for the review. Um, but what I will
Yeah.
say is that, again, like, this is a Japanese studio, and while I still I still think that a Japanese studio or an Asian-based studio would probably understand Silent Hill better. This doesn't feel it. Like, this feels very... I don't know if this was like... This is what Konami wanted to try to recreate, like, the PT craze, because... Which, mind you, PT was not representative of what Silent Hills was supposed to be, and even that demo was way more engaging than this game. So
yeah, if I could go on a limb, I would say that Konami at least is probably partially at least responsible, because it does seem like that, Konami is trying to they probably would try to try to do something similar, but I can't say for sure, but that's just what my assumption would be. And it's also just I kind of was worried about this when I heard that was one of the projects that was being worked on, was a Silent Hill game that was about cyberbullying and all that. And apparently that's what this was. But yeah, it just seems like it's also them trying to sort of like follow the trend of Silent Hill 2, where it's more psychological horror and less, occult horror. So I mean, yeah, I didn't really have any high hopes for this game. But Silent Hill is kind of it looks like it's just going to be a clusterfuck going forward. With maybe the exception of F, but yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, you wouldn't be missing out on the short message, to be quite honest. That's why I sent you the gameplay, because I didn't think you would want to play the game anyway. I really didn't want to, but I was just like, it's free, right? So
the other thing too that I was going to mention is that you pointed out that apparently, yeah, like it's free, I guess in most places, but I think what would you say, like Germany or something?
So
you actually have to.
So yeah, the game is free to play. However, this is the most fucking ironic thing too. The game is set in Germany, but German players have to pay for PlayStation Plus in order to play the game.
That's some irony right there.
Like, I don't know. And again, without going too much into it, like, this game had notes about talking about like COVID, like, and how the Chinese were coming in to fix up infrastructure that the Japanese like architects failed at or something. Like, oh, and
that's a really weird thing to focus on.
Oh, and Silent Hill is name dropped as a quote unquote phenomena where people see fog and monsters at any given location when they're dealing with like very stressful situations. Yeah.
I mean, it's just...
Well, really quick too, like the only thing that is like remotely Silent Hill is this mention of a witch that is technically related to one of the characters in the game. And so that kind of deals with a little bit of occult stuff, but it goes nowhere past the fact that like you hear about this person and they end up killing themselves because you read about it in a note, right? Because this game also, happens to deal heavily on suicide.
Yeah. I mean, they were kind of doing something similar, I think, with that Silent Hill Ascension series, where a lot of it is focused on characters going through like traumatic or trauma, like that. Like they had that whole like stupid what was it, like the It's Trauma emote or whatever, and it's just
they had it as an emo and they're selling it as a t-shirt.
I don't know if they're just self-aware that, or if they just, I mean, because it's just, am I supposed to take that seriously, or is it a joke? Like, I'm just really confused about like what I'm supposed to take away from that. Like, it's just, I mean, I don't know. It's just so weird. Like Ascension in the first place was just a really, just out of nowhere thing that nobody, of course, nobody was asking for. Like, it's a interactive web series.
Twitch plays Silent Hill, which, to be quite honest, like, Twitch plays Silent Hill doesn't sound like a bad idea on paper when you think of, okay, well, like, it's a computer just playing through Silent Hill 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, right? That doesn't sound like a bad idea, right? We've seen that with Dark Souls. It can be done. Hell, I think they've even done it with Pokemon. The problem becomes when you make a whole interactive web series based on it. You have the possibility of people's original characters showing up, and whatever decisions are made within the game are final. So you can never see what the potential alternative scenes are because they want the community to decide what ends up becoming canon for that game. So that game is in on itself a big old clusterfuck, right? But again, that game is also kind of in a similar situation, where they handle like traumatizing experiences and events very poorly, and they don't know what the fuck they're doing with it, and they're just treating it as if it's like, this is a gag, this is cool, like we can profit off of this, right? And not actually delve into these issues in a very serious way while still making a very enjoyable and potentially fun game, right? So
Yeah,
that's where we're at.
I will say, like, what I'm seeing happening with Silent Hill and Konami is it's similar to what we see happening with a lot of entertainment or different franchises within the entertainment industry. You know, you have a franchise that started off with people that loved and cared about the property, and it eventually gets taken over by people, basically just a giant corporation that only really cares about the financial aspect of it, like how much money can we make off of this property. Um, you know, they care more so about that and trends and all that other stuff, that as opposed to actually making something or actually putting a team together that, you know, talented people to make something good. It's more so like, how can we sell this? How can we you know, just bring this property back and sell it to people or sell it to new customers. And it's basically the result of these different suits in a boardroom, be it Western or Japanese businessmen making terrible decisions, completely out of touch with what the audience wants, trying to resurrect a franchise that either has been dead or for different reasons for years, and bringing it back only to make it just so much worse than it was, and thinking that, you know, they're doing something good, and just not really understanding that they're just completely, you know, they're just resurrecting a corpse just to kill it again, essentially. And that's what I'm seeing happening with Silent Hill, and it's unfortunately happening with a lot of different things. But, you know, Silent Hill unfortunately is another victim of it.
Yeah.
Of just like the company that, you know, Konami being at least the publisher, not really understanding what Silent Hill really is and what about it appealed to people, and just kind of essentially throwing shit at the wall and trying to see what sticks, I guess. But, which is the approach, unfortunately, of a lot of these companies today.
I don't remember if we talked about this last time, and I plan on bringing this up in my own review for the short message in particular. But you know, the reason why people liked PT so much was because it was very different at the time. It wasn't what came before PT, in the sense that it was trying something different. It was from a developer that, you know, yeah, might not have necessarily the greatest track record, because they do a lot of weird things, right? Hideo Kojima is just known for being a very weird developer, right? But at least people like that about that developer. They're interested in a lot of the things that they put out. I mean, hell, for a lot of the shit that Death Stranding gets, well, right? People are interested
I would point
right?
out too, like, it wasn't just Kojima as well. Like, you know, we also had Del Toro. We had apparently, which I didn't even know, and I was kind of shocked me, but the manga artist Junji Ito involved as well with the project, which I would say, like, I mean, Kojima is great too, but I think a lot of the reason too why the horror worked so well is because, you know, Del Toro is an experienced horror director, and Junji Ito is a very experienced horror mangaka. And you know, you just have these people working together, and that's probably why it was as successful as it was. You know, they knew what they were doing.
You have two people experienced in horror, and you got a guy with some really weird fucking ideas. Like, that's a match made in heaven. If they had just let Kojima cook, like, they would have had that success, and they squandered it. And now we're left with developers that clearly don't know what they're doing. And You mentioned Silent Hill F, and I know I've mentioned it before too, as well in our previous discussions. But like Silent Hill
Well,
F
another thing
is,
I would also point out about Silent Hill F as
Mhm.
well is because you, I mean, the guy behind that, Ryokishi Seven, like he's not as good as he used to be, but he is somebody else who has delved into horror,
Yeah.
and he knows I would hope at least he knows what he's doing in that regard. So I mean he at least at least he used to he knows what works, and I think that's why I have some optimism in regards to that game. But it's just shows that you have talented people. You're going to most of the time at least get something it is that is good. So I mean that's why I'm at least excited about that one. But yeah, sorry, I
Yeah,
cut you
yeah.
off.
I was just saying that, like, why I'm looking so much forward to that is because, unlike a lot of these studios, which, again, is kind of unfortunate that this one, the short message, was developed by a Japanese studio and it turned out to be bad, at least in my opinion.
Yeah.
Um, F is being developed by a Taiwanese studio because it's
Mhm.
Neobards Entertainment. They're based in Taiwan. So I'm interested in seeing what they could do. I have hope that they could do something really good because it's even though they've worked on like Resident Evil Reverse and Resident Evil Resistance, those were really just projects under Capcom. I think that they have more potential doing something different like Silent Hill, right? Or even potentially their own game in the future, right? And going from there. I really do think that they have potential to be a really good developer in terms of the kinds of games that we could be seeing from them in the future, especially with the fact that they're also working with people who were formerly with Konami, Sega, Capcom, Bandai Namco, etc. Right?
Mhm.
Because that's what that studio is really comprised of is people who are experienced with a lot of these other studios that are mostly based in Japan. Um, so I have high hopes in that regard too, and because of the fact that like yeah, it does look different, and yeah, it does kind of seem like it's going for a Siren Blood Curse vibe. That to
I mean,
me is
which is
just a
fine because I mean I would rather have I mean I'd be fine with like I guess a spiritual successor to Siren Blood Curse, which Siren Blood Curse is another game or games that some of the former Team Silent people worked on.
right, and
So
and
I mean that's another reason why that's probably another reason why I guess it felt more like Silent Hill is because it kind of reminded me of Siren Blood Curse.
yeah, and I think really like just thinking about that, right? It's like that, or even prior to when PT was a thing, or I'm sorry, when Silent Hills was a thing, right? When we get stuff like this, that's a little bit more exciting because it sounds like okay, these are people that maybe they might not make the best Silent Hill story per se in terms of like okay, it's delving more into that like cult horror and stuff like that. It'll still be
Mhm.
different enough from doing the same thing of just trying to recreate Silent Hill 2, right?
Right. Yeah,
Um,
because that's unfortunately what's been going on with Silent Hill is that everything is just basically sort of the same kind of psychological horror as Silent Hill 2 was. And they're
yeah,
not really, going trying to do anything else with that.
yeah. So like Silent Hill, the short message. Again, don't really want to spoil too much on it, but like I will say, like the only thing that I could say that was the only few good things that I could say about it is like the monster was designed by Masahiro Ito, so it doesn't look bad per se. It's just it's in a bad game. The other world, like the way that they transition, even though it causes frame rate dips, it's very much like the first live action movie. Not necessarily bad. I didn't have a problem with it. And the soundtrack is done by Akira Yamaoka, which I'm pretty certain if that guy was in a drunken stupor, he'll put out a banger. Like if that dude was like coked up on meth for the next 10 years, he'll still put out a banger. I'm almost certain
Yeah.
of it. Like hopefully not to that extreme, of course, but like just you get what I'm saying is that like
Yeah.
there are
Yeah.
things there that there are talented people that at least are involved, but it's like unfortunately they're being put onto these projects that like they don't make like they shouldn't be Silent Hill, or they shouldn't even have Team Silent members or former Team Silent members or people who have worked on Silent Hill games involved in those projects to begin with. So
Yeah, I would definitely agree.
I would argue that, Short Message is obviously worse than Silent Hill 2 Remake. At least Silent Hill 2 Remake, if there's anything positive I can say about that so far, is that at least it's a game. At least I can do things in it.
Right.
So that's my standing on it, but holy fuck, like, honestly, Konami should be paying everybody to play that fucking game. It's that bad, in my opinion. And the fact that German players have to pay for PlayStation Plus just to play it is like, no, you should pay those motherfuckers to play that fucking game, because that game is shit. Like, yeah. So that's where I stand on Silent Hill.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we went over quite a bit of stuff, I guess, not just on the Silent Hill 2 Remake, but just where the franchise is at in general. And I mean, especially after they released the Short Message. But I guess if they release any, they release some gameplay for some, like maybe Silent Hill F or something else, like we'll come back and talk about that. Or, when the game comes out, I guess, whenever that's going to be.
Yeah, I would say
as of right now, there's just not too much to go on with what we got from the Silent Hill 2 remake. We did get more gameplay, and it's not looking too good. So I guess we'll have to wait and see how that pans out. Which I'm just gonna say it's probably going to be a bad game.
Yeah.
I think we can pretty confidently, from what we've seen so far, we can probably say that much.
I would say
it's not going to be good.
I'd see best case scenario, it turns out to be like an average horror game, but a terrible fucking remake.
Yeah.
I would say if you honestly want a Silent Hill-esque experience, you want to start looking at the indie horror games that are coming out now. Because there's the one thing that I can say is, like, it seems like at least the indie horror scene is like really trying to kind of stray away from just doing the first person run and hide sim and really do like more like your classic survival horror stuff. And if you want like something like Silent Hill, start looking into like games like Tormented Souls, because we're getting Tormented Souls 2 soon, right? There's Hollow Body, which just got kickstarted not too long ago, like last year. Post Trauma
was that other one. Yeah, I was about to say that one too. Yeah,
so like we definitely are starting to see more developers go less into the let's try to make a Resident Evil spiritual successor and more into let's try to make something like Silent Hill or just as wacky as Silent Hill type of territory, which that's what I'm really looking forward to, more so than the Resident Evil stuff, which is weird because I'm like I'll admit, like I'm a casual Silent Hill fan, but like I would rather see that community like get together and make something that Konami is clearly failing to capitalize on, right? Because if Konami's not going to give you a proper Silent Hill, you might as well make your own, right? Or support the people that are making their own. Yeah,
unfortunately, that's where we're at. We can't really rely on Konami to try to, successfully bring the franchise back. It's and unfortunately, it's not really like the Capcom situation where, I would say they've fairly successfully brought the Resident Evil franchise back from where it was. But with Silent Hill, it's just it's just unfortunate. I mean, we just can't really get a decent Silent Hill game, it seems. Like I said, I'm holding out hope for some games like Silent Hill F, but everything else I really don't care about. I'm not excited for this remake at all, to be honest with you. Like, of course, after hearing about the people working on it and the reveal trailer is like, it's just unfortunately further cemented my, I would say just, not really being excited for this. It's unfortunately, I feel like it's just kind of a train wreck waiting to happen at this point.
And one last thing I want to say about F is that I don't know, but I'm kind of expecting it to be like that game where like people end up ignoring because of we've already had Ascension was
Yeah.
really bad. The
If
short
anything,
message
the
is not
game's going to
really
be
good,
kind of like a
right?
diamond in the rough in a way. It's gonna
Y-
be like a
People
you
are
know a fairly underrated game that people, at least maybe a little bit, like after some time has passed, probably by word of mouth, it'll have some popularity.
that's what I'm
Um,
thinking because like we've already got
yeah,
two games that are already out, right? Well, it's technically an experience and a game, right? That are already out. They're both bad.
yeah.
We don't know shit about Townfall. Um, because that was another one that's supposed to be coming out. We don't know shit about it, right? We have SH2 Remake, which we've already seen a little bit, and it's not looking too good. F, we've only seen the one trailer for so far, but at the very least, it looks more intriguing than
It
Silent Hill 2 Remake.
another thing too. It's funny because that trailer just gives you like, it feels like it gives you so much more to latch onto than uh, any of
Yeah.
the trailers we have for Silent Hill 2 Remake. And I would say that's because it shows you what the main, like, I guess, the probably what the monster design is going to be, what the main horror is going to come from, and I mean it gives you some stuff to really kind of talk about, whereas we just don't really have that for Silent Hill 2 Remake.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Yeah,
so
and I think it's in a much better standing because like aside from these video game projects, we also have a movie that's coming. Right, it's going to be
oh,
the
that's right, I completely forgot. Yeah,
third live action movie from the the original director for the first movie, who's making a movie based on Silent Hill 2.
I hate to say it, but that's probably going to be the better version of the of Silent Hill 2 in comparison to this remake, probably.
I would
At least
hope.
story wise.
I would hope, but
I
I
mean,
didn't really like the Silent Hill movies personally. Like, I, I,
it.
I could see why people like the first one after watching Revelations,
Yeah,
but
I mean,
like,
I will say at least it's the guy that did the first one, which was, at least in my opinion, one of the better video game movie adaptations. It didn't necessarily try to adapt any particular Silent Hill game. It sort of took certain story elements and stuff from both one and two, and adding some like original characters in there. And I feel like it did a fairly decent job for what it was. But I guess the difference here is that this is directly adapting Silent Hill 2. So I guess we'll see how he manages that. But
yeah.
yeah,
That's where we're at with Silent Hill 2 stuff, or not even just
Mhm.
Silent Hill 2 stuff, just Silent Hill in general. And that's kind of why I was bringing up F again because I feel like all these other projects might not turn out so great, and you're gonna have F possibly be the last project to actually come out, right? And people are gonna end up ignoring that game because they are burnt out from all these other projects that just didn't turn out great. So why would this new project be good, right? And it might not be that
yeah,
bad of a project. Again, I don't want to say for sure, right? Because we don't know about that game either, right? But so far, I'm more optimistic about that one game out of everything else as far as Silent Hill projects are concerned. But otherwise,
Mhm.
like I said before, I would much rather prefer Silent Hill be dead because at least I wouldn't be able to be disappointed by upcoming projects that aren't going to live up to expectations, right?
Yeah. Right there with you.
So,
uh,
with that all said, though, I think we pretty much covered everything we could.
mhm.
Where can we find you, Chaos?
You can find me on YouTube and Twitter at Kaptain Kaos. You can also find me on Instagram at Enigmatic Arts, where I sometimes post my artwork.
Alrighty, and you all know you can find me as BioDevil_Dom. I'm on YouTube, Twitter, now X videos if you prefer. I mean, really,
Dumbest name change ever.
right. Pretty much that's what I'm dealing with. I finally got a new capture card that functions, so I'm able to record stuff again, which is nice. That's part of the reason why I was able to record the short message. Um, so that is a review that I'm working on almost pretty much immediately because that game pissed me off so much. But once I'm done with that, I'm probably going to go back to hopefully scripting the RE3 review because I'm almost done scripting that one. And getting into scripting the RE Dead Aim and RE4 original reviews because I wanted to release those 3 reviews at the same time. When those will come out, I can't really say. Hopefully sooner than later, but I got a lot of IRL stuff going on at the same time too, so it makes it very difficult to manage both doing YouTube stuff and doing IRL stuff. So one thing at a time. So hopefully soon you'll see me with Silent Hill again, unfortunately. And then after that, we'll go back to RE stuff, the stuff that I'm really looking forward to talking about, stuff that I'm actually excited to share my thoughts on and actually have a good recommendation for, so to speak. Because so far I've been reviewing stuff I've not enjoyed, which is kind of ironic, right? With the few exceptions here or there. So hopefully that'll change soon. But anyway, we hope you all enjoyed today's podcast. Hopefully we'll have another one soon because the Berserk podcast, which is coming, that's pretty much done and ready to be uploaded. And hopefully soon we can talk about Onimusha, the anime, because I do really want to talk about that as well. So that'll be some fun stuff. So anyway, see you guys.
Yeah.